I am an African.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Africa for Dummies, A4D, your podcast for African politics and economics. Mostly we're doing African politics these days. But of course, we are having this episode because of the protests in Kenya that have been happening for the last week. These protests have seen quite a number of people die, and we thought best explain what's going on in Nairobi and across the country's metropolises. And we brought back a guest who we've had previously before, a Kenyan himself, who is a scholar of international relations in the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, Dr. Westen Shilaho. Have I got it?
Shilaho.
Shilaho, yes. Dr. Westen Shilaho, and he's written quite a lot of books on African politics, international relations, and has spoken quite a bit on these actual protests on various other media platforms. So, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Zenge, for having me back.
Yeah. No, it's always a pleasure to have you on with your insights. And I know you're a very busy man right now. So for those who are listening to us, these are quite late hours in East Africa and Southern Africa as well. So if you can just explain to us what exactly are these protests about, to explain it to someone who doesn't know anything about this. So what exactly are these protests about?
Greetings to you, Zenge, and to your listeners. Do you have viewers or only listeners?
It's a bit of both, but mostly listeners, yes.
Okay, to your listenership. Zenge, that question, well, you can elicit as many responses as possible. One, basically, it's about Kenya's Finance Bill 2024, which the government has worked on in the last couple of weeks. A bill that had gone through the first reading, second reading, and then passed at the third and final stage. Now it was awaiting presidential assent. And the president returned it to parliament and then eventually withdrew it. So what is the problem with this bill? First, the bill it's about government revenue. Government was to enact this bill so that it collects revenue, it collects taxes from Kenya to cover its budget for the coming financial year. But that's what governments do basically across the world. They collect revenue, and then that revenue, they meet their obligations, which means responding to people's social, economic, and other concerns. This bill actually is punitive. It has provisions that basically task Kenyans basically across the board, whether you're talking about their incomes, whether you're talking about their businesses, whether you're talking about land, whether you're talking about livestock, things that Kenyans have not heard about for a long time. A bill that basically seems to be like a throwback to the colonial era. Basically, they're taxed virtually across the board, whether they are farmers, they're traders, there are people who are in gainful employment, there are people who are in the import business, there are people who want to invest in Kenya.
Yeah.
Basically across the board. So Kenyans are protesting and say, one, look, already the tax regime as it is now is punitive. It leaves them virtually with no money in their pockets for those who are lucky enough to have jobs.
Yeah.
And for those who are engaged in their own enterprises, no income, no profits for their efforts. And for those who want to invest and create jobs, they can't do it because overhead costs are just too high. So Kenya is saying no. They told the president, please don't go ahead with this bill. They told the government, don't go ahead to enact this bill, but the government didn't listen. They went ahead and passed the bill. And Kenyans across the board rose up and poured into the streets to express their discontent and disgruntlement. That's where we are. But I must add, Senge, it's not just the bill. The bill is a symptom of a bigger problem. The bill is what, as it were, broke the camel's back. Kenyans have had to make do with a lot of problems, be it impunity by the political elite, be it grand corruption by the political elite, be it hubris, the political elite who treat Kenyans with a lot of disdain, be it a criminal justice system that is flawed and which lets the political elite and their friends off the hook and severely punishes ordinary Kenyans, be it a healthcare system that has ground to a halt, the education sector that has ground to a halt, lack of food security, a whole host of things, police brutality, extrajudicial executions. In your intro, you talked about it. Kenyans are rising up against state excesses, and in my opinion, they're rising up against a state that has basically decayed, such that it cannot meet its obligations and better the living standards of Kenyans.
Yeah, so what exactly, because some things have been mentioned that are, that have got the most traction. When I read it, there was something to do with content creation, taxing something to do with content creation. And there was another one that was to do with bread. They said there was a tax on bread, like a new tax on bread. And then there was another very controversial one on sanitary pads as well. So if you can just, this is a very expansive bill. Why exactly are they trying to put in the bill, and what is the money for? And there's also, Kenya also has some debt issues as well. So could you just sort of explain to us this sort of background? Why are they, what is the money for? Why are they all of a sudden, is it all of a sudden in the first place trying to tax everything? And where's the money going? And, what's the debt situation? Is this related to the debt situation in any way?
Well, Zenke, you're correct. When a government taxes basic things like sanitary towels, bread, mobile money transfers also. In Kenya, the mobile money transfer business is big. Kenyans transfer money through mobile telephony. Well, then that tells you that basically there's nothing that this bill does not spare. It tells you that. We tax bread. That's basically bread. Bread is symbolic. It's about food, actually. Well, the government of Kenya is in debt. It's in debt. If you're talking about African countries that have found themselves in the doldrums, economic doldrums, as a result of binge borrowing, Kenya is one of them. In the previous administration under Uhuru Kenyatta, they went, and William Ruto was the deputy of that government, they went on binge borrowing. Borrowed a lot of money from China. Yes. From China, from the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, ostensibly for infrastructure development, road network, the railway line, the first,
the standard gauge railway line.
Yes, standard gauge railway line from Mombasa, the port city, to Nairobi, cost astronomical amounts of money. But that's beside the point, Zenke. Kenyans are saying, as we speak now, there is no clarity. There's no unanimity on exactly how much the government owes those lenders.
Okay.
Shrouded in opacity. Contracts that were signed by the Kenyan government with the Chinese company that constructed the standard gauge rail weighted in favor of China. So there's the debt problem, which the Ruto administration says it has the obligation to pay back. And one of the ways of doing that is by collecting money from Kenyans. You understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
To the tune of, well, this is, as I said, the figures not known, but what's flying out there could be in the tune of 80 billion US dollars.
80 billion, and Kenya's GDP
Yeah.
is around 100 billion, somewhere there.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
So basically, the government revenue goes to servicing the debt. Kenya is saying, no, look. So William Ruto promised to clean the mess of corruption, the mess of that borrowed money that ostensibly was meant for infrastructure and development, but which ended up in people's pockets. Well, Kenyans gave him the benefit of the doubt. You can go ahead and do it, but you are part of that administration that engaged in that binge borrowing. So clearly there's a problem of debt in the country. But Kenyans do not agree with President William Ruto that the way to go about it is to tax them to bone in the hands of a very tiny fraction, political elite, and their cronies. And you can see the kind of opulence they exhibit, which has angered Kenyans. So, and these are people who have not been paying taxes. They purport to be business people. They're into import business. They're into all sorts of businesses, but they create no wealth. They create no jobs. But they're seen around, living fancy lifestyles. Well, can you ask them, look, if there are people to account for the mess that the country is in financially, it is the political elite.
Yeah, and
they are cronies.
Yeah, and now that's now when we look at the actual protest itself, and you said this is sort of like the protest came out as a result of it being sort of the last straw, opulent lifestyles, opaque deals with China, then you tax people more. The storming of the parliament was quite symbolic, especially on the day that it was passed. What was the sort of mood that led to such drastic measures? I don't think many people expected that indeed they will breach parliament. There was a picture of a guy with the speaker's outfit, with the mace. Yeah, the mace as well. Although the speaker, Wetangula, says it was a it was a dummy mace. I don't know if that's just to save face or what. But yeah, there's videos of the speakers going under. Like, why, the last, and it's quite ironic that Kenya is now also a major non-NATO ally, because the United States also had their parliament breached once upon a time. But these are totally different situations. But the level of frustration to enter parliament, was that palpable? And what's people's opinions about it? Is it considered, are people offended, or are people supportive of the protesters that did this? What's just the mood around this and of the storming of parliament, really?
I think for the first time in Kenya's history post-colonial, the people are united against the political elite. That is important. That is unprecedented. Well, the storming of parliament is symbolic, Zengi. The statement that the protesters were making is that this is an institution symbolizes decadence, symbolizes callousness. They don't listen to Kenyans. Symbolizes impunity. They don't uphold the rule of law. Symbolizes hubris. They're arrogant. And they treat Kenyans with a lot of disdain. So Kenyans, that's the statement they were making. Like, look, this is not an august house. This is a citadel of dishonor, where punitive laws punitive policies are manufactured that oppress the people of Kenya and sink them deeper into poverty. And because of recalcitrance, President William Ruto was recalcitrant. He didn't listen. The signs were there. Kenyans expressed themselves openly that they didn't want that bill to be debated, content, both on social media, mainstream media, all over the country. So they can't claim not to have seen it coming. But that was the last resort, Zenge. When other avenues don't work, the Constitution provides for public participation, that the government has to engage Kenyans before they enact laws. They did it. They just shoved it down Kenya's throats. Kenya said, no, it can't be. So it's unprecedented. They couldn't see it coming, Zenga, because they are used to getting away with money.
Getting away with it.
And excesses in the past. And in the past, we're talking about virtually over 60 years. Last year, the same bill, remember? The 2023 finance bill, there was also a lot of discontent and opposition. The government went ahead and enacted it, regardless.
Right.
You understand? So this was the second attempt at imposing punitive tax laws upon Kenyans.
Yeah, so Kenya is considered quite democratic, at least relative to its regional neighbors. There have been comments from other countries like Uganda and even as far as Zimbabwe, whose their youth leaders seem quite inspired by the activism that's going on in Kenya. And they are seeing it as sort of an example of a Gen Z being active. There was always a perception of Gen Zs being, digital activists. And there was one politician who I think even said that these kids are going there with KFC and they're watching Netflix, like almost demeaning them or underestimating them. And what is so different about this protest? Because Kenyans have protested before. I think last year there was the Raila Odinga shutdown. And when I first saw it, my first reaction was, oh, another protest? Okay, but the nature of it was so much more different. It was very modern. It was very appealing to young people, especially in the way that they were branding it. And even the term, like Occupy Parliament, this is a term that's famous whenever people want to protest. There was Occupy Wall Street, I think. That was the first time that was used, and people were protesting the bailouts of banks in around the financial crisis. So what is so different about this protest compared to all of the other protests? Because people are treating this like a watershed historical moment. What's so different about this? Why should we stop and say, okay, Kenya has turned the curve here?
Then the one, I've always spoken out against Kenyan exceptionalism. And the Kenyan political elite are wont to advance that narrative. It's flawed. All Kenyans must appreciate the fact that they live in a country that's more democratic than its neighbors. You can cite Uganda, you can cite Rwanda, you can cite South Sudan, whichever country. Not quite. You see, Kenya is a pseudo-democracy. Superficially, people will imagine that this is a functional democracy. Elections are held after every 5 years. Presidents do change after 10 years. There is a power transition. But that democracy is flawed. It's a guided democracy, especially by the political elite, because of the inequalities that I'm talking about. When the wealth of a country is in the hands of a few people, civil liberties follow. Democracy is compromised. But these are people who have for a long time, tried to lull Kenyans, especially young Kenyans. Look, don't go into the streets. You're going to, endanger stability and peace. You're going to be like Somalia. No, young Kenyans have said, no, enough is enough. These guys are taking us for a ride. You're asking, what is different about this protest? Zenga, these protests are epic. They are sui generis. They are unique. What makes them unique, Zenga, is that unlike in the past, you mentioned Raila Odinga had such protests last year.
Yeah.
In the past, protests have been instruments. The political elite in the past would call Kenyans onto the streets with the aim of, ratcheting up the political temperatures, as it were, so that when the protests reach fever pitch, the country, is rendered ungovernable. Then they can cut deals with the government of the day. They share the spoils in terms of positions, in terms of tenders, in terms of postings. They are called to be part of the gravy trade. Raila Odinga, for instance, last year, courtesy of the protest, he extracted this assurance from President William Ruto that President William Ruto is going to propose his name for AU Commission Chair candidate. You understand?
Yep.
That kind of cynical politics. Kenya saying, no, we have had enough of this cynical politics. These protests are organic in the sense that young people in Kenya, they have risen up, irrespective of ethnicity, irrespective of regionalism, irrespective of class. This politician you're quoting who is talking about, young people eating fast foodstuffs, riding Ubers. He's not trying to introduce class there, but young people from, high density suburbs, low density suburbs, from the rural areas have all risen up against this administration. Why? Because the cost of living is unbearable. And it's unbearable to all and sundry. So they are unique because they have transcended Kenya's perennial problem of ethnicity. They are unprecedented because they do not have a figure. There's no figurehead. You say, no, this is a leader.
There's no leader, yeah.
Yes, wants to compromise and douse these flames. You call this leader to State House, and then you buy this leader or this group of people. And then when they go back, they tell the protesters there is no such a person.
Yeah.
So they are led by the protesters themselves.
And
that's what makes it hard for the government to contain them.
Yeah. So it is a very differently organized, if you can even say organized, or just organically grown protest. And seeing, we're talking about leaders, there has been quite a sort of alarming or concerning report from Amnesty International that reported that 12 people involved in the protest have been abducted. Although William Ruto, in his second speech yesterday, answered the question and said that all of, if not most of them, have been found in custody, and those who have, some of them have been processed and been released. So why is they, why are they, what's your comment on any of the of these abductions? And then also the nature of the conduct of the protests. Last week I heard of the protest and I didn't hear of any serious deaths, but here we are seeing the protests, the deaths range from 22 to 30. Yeah, and it seems that the youth have a capacity, I'm hearing a lot of people saying we don't fear the government, we don't fear. People are increasingly having a capacity for injury for the sake of winning this protest. Normally, aggression and death throes will turn people down and would just end the protest, in other words. But people are willing to, dare I say, to risk their lives for this.
Well, because of the problems that have festered for decades, decades. These youth, if you listen to them, and I do listen to them often, spaces that are transmitting from Kenya on a daily basis, Twitter spaces, as it were. They're saying they have nothing to lose other than the chains, other than the shackles, nothing to lose. They have completed college, there's no hope, there are no jobs. And those who have tried their hand at business, they set up your business, you pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
To county governments, to the national government, all sorts of government agencies and bribes. I mean, they can't stand this anymore. It's now or never. They have to fight and ensure that they take their country back from the political elite and ensure that they have a country that responds to their needs, to their aspirations, and to their concerns. And the president is talking about death. And he's talking about death quite flippantly, Zenke. You know, Zenke, that under these kind of conditions, circumstances, you can't trust the government when it gives you figures of how many people were shot dead. You can't trust them. It's in their best interest to make the figure as conservative as possible. So the president, William Ruto, is the least qualified person to talk about the casualties, because he's the one who unleashed the security apparatus against these unarmed protesters, advancing, perpetrating this history. The police in Kenya, they've got this odious history of responding high-handedly, brutally against protesters, and they did exactly that. Such that there are reports coming out of Kenya that the killings continued, extrajudicial and summary executions continued late into the night in some poor districts of Nairobi, and they have not been reported. Today, as we speak, further killings have continued, such that there are images on social media about children who have been summarily executed. Some have had to receive, 6 or so bullets. That is unconscionable violence. What is the end game? Is it necessary?
And yeah, that's actually an interesting note on what exactly the end game is, because when you look at the trajectory and the way Ruto has responded, the first response on Tuesday night was very strong, very dismissive of the the breach of parliament, and I think the defense wings were deployed. He did deny, and then in the next speech, he denied that there were any extrajudicial killings, and he withdrew, not withdrew, rather, he refused to assent to the bill. But there has been, before it was simply people did not want a certain portion of the bill, but some are even calling now for the resignation of the president. But what is exactly the end game there? Will deputy president, what difference necessarily will it make for calling for William Ruto to resign? And then some are saying they want to march on State House. This is what I heard from Al Jazeera and the BBC. Some of them are saying that I'm just trying to figure out what exactly is the end game now that the bill has been withdrawn. Although he did say he would try again, although he didn't necessarily say he would try and put the bill again, but he said he would try again to source some funding. I think he was talking about how he thinks the funding is for a good cause and so on and so forth. But my concern is, what exactly is the end goal right now, and how do people feel towards the fact that Ruto has sort of conceded, in his own words, actually, to the protesters in terms of signing the finance bill? What is the way forward? And yeah.
Well, Zenke, he hasn't conceded. He has retreated. He has retreated because he realized that, because remember, you are quite correctly juxtaposing the first press conference and the second. The first one, he was bullish. very recalcitrant and threatening. It wasn't conciliatory at all. He didn't extend an olive branch to the protesters. Instead, he called them criminals and even invoked treason in reference to those young people. It was the second press conference when he announced that he had taken the bill back to Parliament for amendments and then subsequently withdrew the bill. Why? Because he could, at that juncture, he could predict the consequences of his intransigence. It doesn't matter, and this is since a recorded history. It doesn't matter how much gunpowder you have. It doesn't matter how many police officers you have. Once the people rise up in numbers en masse against you as a leader, you are not going to prevail. You will kill some of them, but you will not prevail. That he understood later. He hadn't understood it during that first press conference. So he has retreated tactfully. There are certain declarations that he was supposed to make as evidence that he's in tune with the gravity of the situation. First, he was to announce that the young people who were arbitrarily arrested, those who have been abducted, Gestapo-like abductions, had to be released unconditionally. Charges are to be withdrawn. That is in the spirit of reconciliation, olive branch that I'm referring to.
That's what you announced.
Yes, he didn't do that. These young people are still incarcerated. They're still in remand. Some are yet to be accounted for. So he has not conceded. The hardline stance is still there. Only that he wants to placate the anger as he schemes the next course of action.
I see.
That's my take. Yes, and you're saying, what is the end game for the protesters? The protesters are saying it's beyond the bill, Zenge. It's beyond the bill. They are seizing this moment to ventilate about all the frustrations that they have gone through. All of them, be it brutality by the police, be it nepotism when it comes to employment, be it tribalism when it comes to employment, be it corruption by the political elite, be it wastage by the political elite, name it, be it an education system that has atrophied, doesn't function, be it a healthcare system that has atrophied, doesn't function. They're saying, be it people are being paid while holding positions that are not provided for under the Constitution, impunity. So it's beyond the bill. Or saying you're not going to assent to the bill is neither here nor there. Kenyans are saying that currently, as the state is, does not serve their interests. And they're also insisting that the president, despite having been voted for by the people of Kenya, he is beholden to foreign interests. Washington, the World Bank, and the IMF, and those lenders you mentioned earlier. And they're saying, nope, we are the sovereign, people. Power reposes in us, the people of Kenya. You're only exercising it on our behalf. So you have no business listening to any other actor, any other party. You have to listen to us. So this bill, we have passed that, Zenge. The end game, in simple terms, is that Kenyans and through these young people are insisting that the state must be overhauled. This Kenyan state architecture, whether you're talking about the judiciary, whether you're talking about the parliament, whether you're talking about the executive, whether you're talking about the media, whether you're talking about the school system, the healthcare, this architecture, as it is, has decayed, it must be overhauled. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all the burning questions that we have at the moment. And I can see we're really running out of time, but this has been an incredibly insightful episode, and a very heated one, actually, because of the fact that the events are still unfolding. We still don't know exactly where this is going to go. But
Zenge, I must tell you, I must add is that the president has lost legitimacy. That's my honest assessment. assessment, he has lost legitimacy.
I am an African.